What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video and another live stream. Today, I'm joined by Jordan Pappas of the band Camelcase, which is just essentially him right now. And he's a singer-songwriter who I wanted to invite on to talk about music. Anybody who's familiar with my past knows that I used to be in a band and I've been a singer in different groups and stuff like that. And it's something that I haven't really had too much of when it comes to a voice here on the channel. I've had a couple musicians on, but not enough. So today I'm joined by Jordan. How's it going, my friend?
Dude, it is going well. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, man, for sure, for sure. So let's start off, I guess, with a pretty straightforward question. Whenever I have YouTubers on here, usually the question is, hey, what made you turn the camera on? What made you like start recording videos? But in the case of yourself, what got you into music, man? Where did your journey with music start?
Yeah, so I was a wee lad, and I feel like I was 7 or 8 years old, living in Texas at the time, and sports had not clicked for me yet. Let's say that. Like, I was not showing myself to be good at those things. So there was through our church in Dallas, there was something like one of our friends was offering this come learn guitar class, and me being 7, I was a tiny thing, and my mom took me to, I want to say Target, and like bought a first act guitar, but it wasn't even 3/4 size. It was like, a ukulele. I still have it somewhere. Actually, I should have pulled it out. But anyway, I attended these classes and learned guitar chords, and pretty much from ages 7 to, I'll say 11, guitar was just something my parents made me learn. Like, it was like, oh, let me go. Like, I had all the fancy music theory books out, just like and played some kind of orchestral shows that people were kind enough to let me in, me being too young and stupid to know I'm not plugged in, nobody hears me. But so that kind of journey happened. Somewhere in my early teens, something clicked where it was like, wait, this is fun. And I started because I started at 7, I was getting kind of noticed as like, oh, you're kind of 5 years ahead of where most people are at this stage. And so I had the writing bug early. So I started writing songs at 13, and kind of traveled through there. Like, once college hit, did the typical, let's start a garage band kind of thing, and didn't really take off. And it's kind of been a love-hate relationship as I turned 30 2 months ago. So it's kind of been a journey up to this point for sure.
Nice, man.
On that end. Yeah.
Well, it's cool to hear that you started so young, right? Like, because that's something I always wish I had done. When I started with music, it was in my teenage years, and it was with drums. I just thought it was cool and loud and crazy. I was that side of let me get into music. And then eventually I became more in love with it, and I started to like kind of hone in on singing and did like some vocal lessons and different things like that to actually hone that craft. In recent years, music hasn't been as prevalent. It's something I've kind of done more on my own, but it's something I'd love to get back into. And like you said, it's like it's a grind, and it can be super discouraging, and it can be like a huge up and down. You'll have these moments where you feel like a rock star, and another moment where you feel like nobody cares. So how do you find yourself kind of dealing with that? There's a song I've actually listened to a lot of your songs, which is part of why I invited you on, is because we know each other through a mutual friend initially, but as I started to kind of see your post, I was like, this guy's writing actually good music. And you have a song that obviously speaks on different things, but a song called Ebb and Flow, and it talks about the ebb and flow of things in life. And so how do you find yourself navigating the music world as you try to make it something that's both a passion and also something you'd love to be a career?
Oh, that's great, man. So if we look at the first half, and like we get through college and that kind of everyone wants a garage band phase. After college, I had from University of Central Florida, I graduated with a history major with no desire to teach. So I just graduated to graduate essentially. And I started doing cover gigs in the Orlando area, and that became my main source of income for a little bit. I met my wife in that area. We did that together. And for anybody who plays any music, or maybe you can imagine, playing covers sucks the life out of you. And it's just, someone said it so beautifully once, where it was like, you have a creative mind and a business mind. And the problem is when everything goes into one pot, and you have to be creative and a business person, and therefore maybe something else gets screwed because of it. So it was kind of this just whatever. And there's always that nagging. And after college, when friends go off and do things, you don't really have that pool of people ready to, yeah, man, let's go. Let's get some red Fanta and like jam it up in the garage kind of stuff because we were good kids and not drinking. But so the people kind of disappeared, and there wasn't really the band behind me, so I kind of had to go down this solo path. To cut through it, I decided after a bit, after getting married in my mid-20s and stuff, like, covers aren't for me. I'm not doing that. I actually went back to school and became and am a software engineer, just because I was like, you know what, this is dumb. Like, I was poor as a musician. I'm going to do something else that interests me. But then, like, it's just such this feeling, and I bet you have it too, from what it sounds like. Just there's always something in a musician that's just like, you should be creating something. Like, you don't have to like write everything, but you need to be doing something with this. So around 28 years old, my wife and I moved from Orlando to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And essentially Camelcase was founded because I was a software engineer. So, you know, I didn't really have to worry about playing covers just to eat food. So there was a little bit of money to throw at recording and like getting some of these dreams on paper, if you will. So Camelcase was founded out of that. And coming at it at 28 and now 30 is it's so different, man, because it's just your market's different. Your mindset is different. To unramble this and go back to the ebb and flow topic, like you find songs like Ebb and Flow, which is about like taking life for what it gives you. That's kind of the thesis of that song, and just embracing it, and just, you know, and I'm like, I don't know if 18-year-old me could write that, because I didn't live that, you know? So
right.
The summation being like at 30, I think I'm writing differently and therefore deeper than I could at 18.
Right, naturally, right? Because that's something I always look back on, the music that I wrote that was recorded. You know,
Yeah.
It's one of those things where when I can look back to the things, the reality is my voice has changed since I was in my, early 20s, late teens, when I was doing a lot of it.
Ditto.
My voice has changed drastically. And on top of that, it's like my style has changed and my overall kind of approach to life has changed. So naturally, my different, I guess, kind of approach to how I would write a song is just so different. When I look back to the days of when I was a kid, we both grew up in the church. I kind of grew up with this very like positive, go lucky kind of attitude, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, but oftentimes in my music came across kind of like, you can do it if you can achieve it, kind of thing. Where it's like, all right, now there's a little bit more nuance to the music, and I think that's part of why I really kind of attached myself to your music a little bit. My favorite song of yours, if I'm completely honest, is "I Don't Care Anymore." I love that song, man. I really do. Your voice is great on it. I just think it's got such a catchy tune. And when I first heard it in that video that you had posted, it's kind of like a reel that you were sharing around of all these different songs. I enjoyed the songs that I was hearing, but that was the one that instantly caught my ear and made me kind of like go through Spotify and listen to it a lot more. And so, that nuance of kind of like growing up is something that I think is kind of, I guess, important when it comes to writing songs. I always wish that I could write songs now, because I know that it'd be so much more mature than they were when I was, younger. And unfortunately, we wrote songs as my band we wrote songs beyond that stuff that we recorded, but then the band ended up breaking up and those things never got recorded. So it's like they, kind of just got lost in the ether. And, lately you've actually recently released a song called Turn Back Time. What can you tell us about the writing process of that? Obviously it was like a single that you had released a little bit in some distance between the last songs you had released. Yeah. And now what made you get, back to writing, and what inspired you with that song in particular?
Yeah. So, we moved from Winston-Salem, North Carolina to Wilmington, North Carolina, out here to the beach in February of this year. So we had a bit of a life change and I needed to step back. Moving here, I was kind of like, well, I'm kind of moving out of the central part of North Carolina, where it's kind of 2 hours to every major city. Music was kind of on death row for me, as far as like I put out a couple posts about it, even like, hey guys, I don't know if this is going to keep happening. Like, I don't know. It's so hard to like put music out. Turn Back Time. I go down to Orlando and record with my producer, Dreamwalker Productions down there. And, we had done that one before I moved. But as anybody knows, you certainly know, with trying to promote your own thing, like, it's just, you can't just drop a song and people hear it. Like you have to think through like, what is life? Like, how do I promote this? How do I
Right.
like make the circle? And you just have to be okay with no ears on it now. And anymore, even it's just like you're putting stuff out and like 2 years from now, it might blow up. Like it's just, you just don't know. You just need to do it because you love it.
Right.
But Turn Back Time, I kept listening to, and it's kind of a deviation from, I tend to write kind of with like if the Killers guitars were in my band, I kind of like that loud early
Right.
2000s rock sound. Turn Back Time, I kind of channeled a little bit of the Fray. Like I wanted something a little more straight, a little more maybe ballad-esque, but something I was just sitting in my room one night and just the lyric, if you could turn back time a million times, would you? And like the song grew out of that sentence of this concept of I'm 30. Would I go back and change the path that got me here? If I could, like, would you change mistakes you've made? Would you do anything different? Because you're just going to end up in another 30-year-old spotty at some point wondering the same things. And so when I had the message of that song down, I decided it would become the successor, the part 2 to Ebb and Flow. So Ebb and Flow leaves the question open-ended, and Turn Back Time kind of buries down a little deeper into that, which is it's a message of Camelcase, man. Like when I sat down, it was, yes, I love like MCR. I love Brand New. I love all these bands. But at this point, I have evolved. My faith has evolved. How I see the world has evolved. I need some hope. And I think a lot of people just need hope in music. And I think that's why if you're listening to a Camelcase song, you need to walk away with something that's like, oh, this isn't doom and gloom. And so I always try to, even if it's at the last line, like something's going to bring it back to there's hope. So Turn Back Time was kind of that.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I love to hear that, and I think it's something that we can all relate to. I know that it's something I tend to struggle with. I live in a constant state of nostalgia. I've found more so than I think a lot of people. And we live in a world where nostalgia is a big thing. And of course you can, tie that into like, oh, there's a new movie that's something I'm nostalgic for. But it really comes down to those memories that you're nostalgic for, those places. You get a sense real quick of like that place or like that you were at a certain time in your life, and it kind of just ports your mind there, and it's easy to kind of like have this like grass is greener, in a way outlook. But then it's kind of one of those things where you kind of have to kind of reflect, how much would you actually change? Are you happy with where you are versus where you could have been, whatever the case may be. But then you kind of just like lose yourself in that, So yeah, I like the idea of hope. It's something I try to hold on to myself, even though there's plenty of times I kind of lose it. But I do appreciate that about your music. I think that's something that I really enjoy about it, is that they can have these questions. And another thing that I'm curious about is, I know when you started the group, our mutual friend Chris was in the group with you. But since then, I know he's moved on and he's no longer in the group with you. But your songs have a medley of different instruments. So how do you go about tackling songs as a solo musician and having to come up with all of the arrangements for the song?
Yeah. So to the technical sides, CJ Chris was the drummer, and great drummer, just phenomenal. And his drumming can be heard on Slipstream, Ebb and Flow, and I Don't Care Anymore. That is him. And so that was a mutual process. After I Don't Care Anymore, he and his wife moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, so a bit away from Winston. So it's just a simple, like, this isn't, part friends and like just good luck on all that stuff, because he's got a whole lot going on and we're still the best of friends today. No ill will there. So moving forward, how I typically write is starting in my room, acoustic guitar and a melody, fleshing that out. Bass and drums are usually in my head. I am not a drummer. I'm a functional drummer, and that if I can like hear something in my head, I can go to the kit and figure it out. But you would not want me backing you up. I don't know that I could hold that beat. So what happened was when I went down to Orlando to record, it turned into just, hey, Mike, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what's in my head. And drummers, cover your ears. But most of it is software now, like, because it's glorified, easy drummer stuff.
Right.
And so, but it is built, it is crafted. Every phrase is like, this needs to do this, and it's that. So for instruments, I am not super great at, which in Camelcase is it's drums and a little bit of bass, but that's usually the Michael Jackson approach of like, hey, let me just sing it to you and you make it happen.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, crafting a song is always tricky though. And there's no formula. Like it's just, it's in the ether somewhere and you just have to sit down and listen for it. It's kind of that cliche and dorky, but
Hey, I mean that works. I
good.
mean, I've always been impressed by the fact that, I know that it's just you and that the songs sound full, versus the fact, like, I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that you're saying that they, that there's a software element to it, right? The fact that it sounds as full as it does, I think speaks to like the artistry and the creativity of yourself and obviously the producer you work with, but just the you have to have some sort of skill within those worlds to be able to bring it all together and make it sound like something that could deceive somebody into the thinking that a full band played this, and I
Yeah.
gotta give you kudos there. Really quickly,
Thanks. Yep.
I have a comment here from my buddy D Movie Man. I realized that I had actually put in the description box to go give some love to your channel. But yes, Jordan does not have a YouTube channel as far as I'm concerned. But I did change that saying go give some love to his music. The link is down below straight to his Instagram and his Spotify. But do you have a YouTube channel?
I'm sure I have one. Maybe Camelcase Official would be it. But it's just simply probably a template dump for some songs. Instagram is the best spot. And there's a link in my bio that has everything as well. So website and all that stuff. So definitely check out the Instagram.
That description down below in the description. The link to his Spotify and his Instagram's there. So definitely give him some love there. But yeah, man, it's interesting. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was just saying I want to see him hack a YouTube account.
Yeah. I would love to see him do that as well.
Let's aim high.
But so I love hearing about your process, man. I love that it's just you and you have this drive and this passion. So I guess my question now is, what do you want to see out of Camelcase? I think the obvious answer a lot of times with this kind of stuff is, it's for it to be a success. But what would be the ideal situation for you dealing with Camelcase? Is it something that you can see yourself bringing other musicians into one day in the future and kind of building out a band? Is it something you can kind of have more as yourself and kind of have more like studio or like performance musicians versus people who are part of the collaborative process? So where's your head at when it comes to the future of Camelcase?
So I am a bit strange in the sense of what I've gotten to experience as far as live music. To answer, how do I like with my original music, in college I had a band called Everheart, which is actually on Spotify as well, and you can hear the evolution. And that was fun. I mean, it was what it was, but I think we only played like 3 live shows over 3 years. There's like 1 EP, but we jammed all the time. And it was just this weird thing, but I have never played an original show with a full set of music. I'm like, I believe in this wholeheartedly. And I feel like we've practiced enough where I'm not freaking out that you don't know what you're playing. Like I've never played my songs with a full set of like, yes, like we got it. So luckily goal 1 is a super low bar. So it'll be knocking that out. And I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, but I have actually met and now jammed with some guys here in Wilmington. Last night was our first time and they're amazing and they've got projects and stuff and they're just well respected in the area. But, that may not necessarily become Camelcase, but it will become an outlet for sure. And so as far as Camelcase goes, I would love to play just some original shows, and I don't know what the number is, but there would be a nice threshold to reach of like level of stoke when a song comes out. And it's probably like 100 people. Like it's not much. It's just enough to know like, hey, the $2,500 this cost all in all to get this to you was like worth it, And right. I think it's I don't know. It's a numbers game at the end of the day, but I think there's a point where you just feel like what you're putting out really matters. And I mean, quite frankly, your comment, you messaged me as soon as I Don't Care Anymore came out and you said, dude, this is it. Like, this is the best one. I love this. And that And what's funny is people really agreed with you. They're like, that was your best song. Turn Back Time has since eclipsed it. People think that's kind of the best culmination. But I think hearing from people is just such a lost art. Everyone's selling something. Everyone needs promotion. But hearing people, like you sent me that message, no strings attached. There was no like, dude, here's a compliment. Like, here's a legit way you moved me. So my frustration with Camelcase has always been a little bit of like, there is no snake oil here. Like, my issue has been more that how do I get people just to listen to music I know they're going to love? And that's kind of been a really hard mental, but also like pragmatic problem to approach. And it's where people like you and like other connections I've made come in handy. It's like, I need help. You guys got to help me spread the word if this is something you want to see, more of. And it sounds so cliche and tired, but it really is, man.
No, I get it, man. And say it's like a numbers game for me. Doing YouTube, it can be super discouraging because I love film criticism. It was something I loved when I was younger, and so when I started doing it, I had to kind of like learn how to be better at it. And I think I'm still learning in a lot of ways. I've been at it for almost 5 years now, and it's daunting. Like you putting yourself out there. And I have tons of cringy videos in my early days, but I leave them there as part of the process. But it's one of those things where, like, kind of like you said, it's like, for me, I've always told people, it's like, I don't necessarily expect to become like Mr. Beast. That's not the world I'm looking to live in.
Yeah.
But for me, sometimes when I put a lot into a video that maybe even struggles to get 100 views, I'll start to kind of kick myself, and I'm kind of lost in this mentality of like, man, not even 100 people, like, I have 2,000 subscribers, not even 100 people care to chime in, and sometimes you gotta kind of get out of that headspace, because the worst part, right, is nowadays we have so much competition in the world of YouTube, in the world of movies and TV and Spotify and all these different music streaming apps, and so many artists and so many, like you said, everybody's looking for promotion. But it is nice, kind of similarly, like when I will just wake up randomly and have somebody who stumbled upon a review and said they subscribed and they really enjoyed the video and how I broke something down, and it kind of makes me think, okay, maybe I'm getting a little bit better at this and I'm making digestible content. So in a similar way with you, it's like, me reaching out to you, it was truly just I listened to the song because I'd seen your video and I saw that you shared it a couple of times, and I was like, dude, like I like that little clip I keep hearing of this I don't care anymore. So I was like, let me listen to this stuff a little bit more thoroughly. And when I text you, actually, I was at work, and I was just in the back at work listening to your songs. And I finished I Don't Care Anymore. I think I repeated it a second time. And I was like, I got to text this dude. I was like, this is a good song, And so, I don't say that to blow smoke up your butt, because I just genuinely do feel that way. That's why I knew I wanted to have you on at some point. And T-Movie Man actually chimed in again with a more interesting question I'd love to hear your perspective on. For you both, what is the most beneficial / challenging aspect of the creative process in making / performing music? Also, how do you shake off stage fright and prepare for performances? You want to go ahead and tackle the question first?
I'm going to take part B first. So stage fright is interesting. My journey with that has been twofold. One, being raised in church, I was on stage at 13 playing guitar. So, it's kind of like you're playing worship music, which is this, in theory, elevated whatever. So any mistakes you make in that context are very noticeable and very like disruptive. So I got through that before I went to college. When it came to singing and stage fright, I will never forget this day or this professor. I went to a community college in Oka, LA. What is that called? College of Central Florida, out there in Ocala, man. And I did my speech class, and completely light switch moment, going from this kid who was like homeschooled until I started dual enrollment and just went to college. So I was 16 doing college classes, and I'm in speech class, and my first speech I ever had to give in front of people who weren't my parents and my sisters. And it was a light switch moment, and people, like, I went up shaking, sweating, like everything. And halfway through, I was like, this is really fun. Like, people have to listen to me. And I've never been scared of the stage since. And now people have to shut me up, and that's like, that was the complete like watershed, like light switch moment there. And that's kind of and there are stakes. Sometimes when you play something but I've never been scared of singing anything since then. Playing guitar, yeah, sometimes. Like when I'm like, yeah, I don't think I can really pull this off or whatever. Do you want to answer B while I think of A? Like
Yeah,
what?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
know
I'm kind
for
of curious.
me, back when I was playing music all the time, it was kind of similar to you. I started in the church, so I started playing the drums on stage, and it was kind of easy,
Ooh,
even
high
though
stakes.
right. So there's high stakes, right? But at the
Yeah.
same time, I felt a sense of comfort in it because a lot of times with churches, they kind of keep you, like most of them have like the soundproof kind of like casing
Oh
to
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
keep you like, and I felt safe in there for some reason. I felt I was safe and I was behind everybody else. And as long as I just kept the beat going good enough to get through the song,
yeah,
that I'd be okay. And I started in my early teens, so it's kind of like this thing where I was like, it's kind of simplistic, kind of like you said, like Christian worship music that we were playing at the time.
yeah,
And as I got better at drumming, eventually, thankfully, it became that thing where I was able to kind of make mistakes sometimes on
mhm,
stage. I started playing more with like youth bands where it was like easy to kind of like make a mistake, have everybody have a little chuckle, but then pick up, I felt confident enough to kind of like pick up where I was able to just easily fix that mistake.
yeah,
And as
yeah,
long
yeah,
as you kind of had poked fun at yourself, I found it was a little easier to get through it. But
yeah.
I remember the early days being nervous, but not too nervous. As somebody who struggles with anxiety today, and I didn't in my early 20s and in my teens,
Mm.
it's one of those things where I remember this massive pterodactyl like feeling in my stomach, like it's almost like a pterodactyl was flying in my stomach versus like an actual
Oh,
butterfly.
jeez. Yeah, yeah,
And I would remember just being so nervous the first time I was actually going to sing in front of people, and that was a big kind of change for me because going from being in the back where I was playing the drums and you had to, everybody could hear what you were doing, but I could kind of just focus on being in my own little bubble versus
yeah,
like now you're in the front, and especially playing in a rock band and a metal band that I was in for my late teens into my early 20s. um, that was daunting, man. You get to these random venues, and especially when we started playing more in the local scene down in South Florida, we're playing amongst bands that are doing it often, that were, a little bit more tenured in it, that maybe the promoters and some of the people knew all these people and maybe they had their posse, and it was just like us and a couple of our friends who showed up, and we'd be so nervous and like nobody knew who we were, and there was kind of this need to kind of prove ourselves. And I
yeah,
just remember feeling so nervous at times, and I can remember a bunch of like really awkward experiences or moments where like thankfully once the music started playing, I was able to save the day. But there was times where I felt like I could see people in the audience like, all right, this guy seems really uncomfortable up here. And I don't know if you've ever had that happen where like once the song starts going and you start doing the musician side of it, you start singing or something,
yeah,
then it's like the nerves start to calm a little bit, because kind of like you said, like now people have to listen to you. Now people are like focusing on you, good or bad. And I feel like it built a sense of confidence in me at the time, um, that just comes from like trying to demand the stage, which doesn't always work. And sometimes
yeah.
I'm sure you've played shows where like literally the room emptied as you were playing it,
Oh
and you're
yeah,
just
dude.
like, dude, those are the absolute worst. Like I
I
can think
think
of
that might be worse than an empty room. Like
Yeah,
when
I'd
you get
rather
like,
it be empty from the start with like,
yep.
a couple of people than have it empty out. I'll never forget this one show that we did, and it was in this club, and we were supposed to be like halfway through the show. It was a huge lineup of like 10 bands, and we were supposed to be halfway around like maybe like the fifth or sixth band, and they
Ooh.
told us like a couple of moments before we're supposed to go on that they're actually pushing us to the last band. And
Oh
we are like, oh
no.
man, this sucks. But it was, and whatever, we stuck around. We were there early. We watched every band play and we tried to talk. And I'll never forget this, man. It was such a soul crushing situation. We walked up to all the band members, before started talking to, as well as people like as we saw them performing, they'd get off and we'd converse with them. And we were trying to connect with everybody, and everybody seemed to really enjoy us. And they were just like, "Oh yeah, what time do you guys play?" And we're like, "We're gonna play at this time." And they were like, "All right, man, yeah, no, we'll be there. We can't wait to see you guys, see what you guys do. Thanks for the support, this, that, and the third." And I'll never forget that we were setting up, and the room just started clearing out. Now, I'm like a lot of local shows, like in between the band sets, sometimes people go out, like stand outside the venue or smoke a cigarette or something,
Yeah,
come back
yeah,
inside. So we were hoping for a little bit of that. We knew it wasn't going to be as packed as it was earlier in the day, but man, it just cleared out. And we ultimately just played to the three people that came with us, the
yeah. Mm.
bartender and the sound guy in the back and the promoter. And it was just the crunchiest feeling of all time. So,
Yeah.
even with being able to shake off the stage fright part of it, and you can be as prepared as you want to be, I found that there was just times where, bro, it was just like some of the most gut wrenching experiences because of the
Yeah.
audience. But then
And
at the
it's a
same
lose
time,
lose. I mean, it's a lose lose
right,
because like the bands are tired, like, and that's it's tiring playing music. It's just such a
right,
anyone who's done any sort of high adrenaline anything and been like, you're only up there 20 minutes. But yeah, but mentally, your adrenaline has been pumping all day, getting
right,
ready. And then there are nerves always, but it's more, at least on my side, it's more like technical nerves, like how, like planning, if you will. Like that's where the nerves come in. Like, okay. And then you play, and at least for how the kind of music I write and sing, especially, like it's a very intense performance, and then it's just like, oh man, like I'm exhausted. So it's kind of hard to be all things to all people, but at the same time, like your that community is all we got, and it's
right.
got to be fostered and nurtured. And that's something as I'm getting older that I realize, like, man, I just can't go out there and play my songs and think I'm the best, because I'm not, and think everyone should open for me because they shouldn't. Like that is
Right.
wrong, first of all, factually, and then it's also just like, what a poison, and what's the point of that? Like we have to support, and it sounds so support local artists, like, but it's you're not, I don't know, like it's not even because you might be supporting the next Dave Grohl. Like you just might be supporting someone's heart for the night who needs just someone to tell them you did really well. Like in it, and for listeners, if you're like one of those three people left, there will be, you can erase that whole stigma in that band's mind when they get off stage. If you're just brave enough to go up and say, you guys absolutely crushed it, this was awesome. And you don't need to lie, but you can like just make sure they know, like, thank you. Like that will erase 70% of the meh, because you're like, at least the people who heard us loved us. And that's,
Right.
I don't know, but that is hard, dude. I'll agree. Emptying out while playing is kind of rough.
Yeah, man, that's a rough one. Like it's just like you're sitting there and you're just struggling, And but on the flip side, and I'm sure we both had times like this. You probably have played in front of an audience that didn't seem interested and became interested as you were playing. And I think that those for
Yeah,
me were
that's
amazing.
fun.
Being like in a metal band in particular, like there was times where the room was still, and once we started playing, a mosh pit would form and people were having fun and stuff. And we would be in these small local venues where somebody can jump on the stage and then stage dive off, and it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it was moments like that definitely made it incredible. And I think that kind of goes into what you were just saying with like the first part of the question, and what is the most beneficial and challenging aspects of creative process of making and perform music. There are so many great moments and things that can happen. You can create something that ends up just like almost like you surpass your own imagination, especially when you're collaborating with somebody, when
yeah,
an idea comes together with somebody else's and it just kind of like creates something even better than you even expected to make. But on the flip side, also in the performing music side of things, one of the most beneficial things can be that like those connections you make and the couple of people that saw you play that come and say the right thing that just give you that jolt of energy. So
yeah.
did you think about a little bit more of like what you would want to answer for that first part?
Yeah, I think it's a tangent of what I was just saying to a degree, where kind of this two-part failing, both either on my side and then also on like the audio. I'm thinking about cover shows when I'm for anyone who isn't familiar with my stuff, I tend to sing high, and that's kind of my party trick, if you will. So when playing a lot of cover songs, what I like to do is either take typically female-led songs or jump octaves with stuff like Mad World and like songs you wouldn't expect, and just really have fun with it and go crazy. And I remember always at cover shows, but it was, I would get told a lot to like, you need to turn down, and like you're too loud, and I'm like, you're missing what's happening here. And that's crushing. And you're like, yes, okay, maybe learn some mic technique, but usually I wasn't even on a mic at that point. And it's kind of, it's hard to have something in your head, and either by your own execution it fails, or because it wasn't the right audience it fails. I would say that's the hardest part of being a creative. And I imagine even with like reviewing movies and like all that, you're just like, how do I get this idea across Like and I know you can see it so clear up here. And it's just like, what words do I use? Because they're up here. It's the weirdest things. They don't always come down on paper. It's such a strange thing. But I think that's probably the most frustrating. Like they don't smell what you're stepping in kind of mindset.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of that, and sometimes and then you kind of get in your own head about it, and then things maybe don't plan out the way you want to. But then there is that element for me, at least with reviewing movies, a lot of times where I'll have a whole review that I'll be building in my head as I'm driving home from like the theater or something. I know exactly what I want to say. I have an eloquent way of kind of phrasing things, and then I get in front of the camera and I'm just like, hi, welcome to my channel, and I just feel like, yeah, exactly. I liked it, and then you have, so for instance, funny enough, I actually just reviewed a new horror movie called VHS 85, and it's doing pretty well on the channel.
I need to watch your review on that. I heard it was,
yeah, it was not great. I'll be honest.
Okay, spoilers.
I didn't like it, and so I gave it a pretty negative review. But I struggled to say. I struggled to phrase my review for it the same way I would another review, because a lot of times, if it's got various themes or, some characters I can talk about, or, maybe the cinematography, the musical score, whatever the case may be, I can kind of break down different elements about it that I liked on a filmmaking level, while also, talking about, the thematics of the narrative and different things like that. For me, VHS 85 just didn't give me enough to talk about. So I guess I must have not noticed it. I said the term or the phrase, quite frankly, I guess a bunch. So I woke up this morning actually to this guy commenting saying, bro said quite frankly like 72 times. And
oh my gosh, that's awesome.
And then he went to another guy's comment under the video and said, like, quite frankly, he was just sharing his opinions. Obviously he was making fun of me, but like,
well done.
Sometimes that happens where it's just like, maybe I responded to the guy just kind of having to take it on the chin and say, like, I guess I'll have to rewatch the video to see.
Hey man, it means he watched the whole thing. Like I wouldn't be complaining about that.
That's the way to look at it. You're not wrong. So like, it's one of those things sometimes where like, even now after all this time, it's still something I'm trying to make, successful as time goes on. But even the video sometimes that will do well tends to, it's not your best work. It's kind of like with you, sometimes your biggest show isn't necessarily your best show, and so then people have like
I get that
kind of preconceived notions or whatever. And man, it's crazy. And you mentioned before kind of like various inspirations, but most notably you mentioned like the Killers and different artists that you like to lean into. Where do you find most of your inspiration today when you're writing new songs for Camelcase? When it comes to the musician side of things, and maybe even vocally, are there specific singers that are like go-to inspirations for you when it comes to vocals?
Yeah, so this has always been hard because, I mean, you can play the game too. It's tell me which band I sound like. That's always been my favorite because nobody can. And it's a compliment. And people always say, well, you sound like Anthony Green mixed with, and it starts getting into a little rabbit hole, which is very, it's flattering, but it's also hard when asked to discuss this. Influences are easier, but they are in buckets. So vocally, when I was a teenager, I was 100% Amberlynn fanboy. So them being from Orlando and Tampa and all that, they were always around, got to see a lot of their stuff. And so Stephen Christian he sings high as well. Like he's up there. So growing up, I would like sing along word for word with like the Cities album. And I would feel my throat just trickle with some, just rip my throat raw daily, just expanding my range. And I did it very poorly. And, but it worked. I got up there, and then I eventually had vocal lessons, which taught me how to breathe while I was in college. So early on, Stephen Christian of Amberlynn was the height, but, more in my 20s and stuff, it became like Lane Staley and like Chris Cornell. And like, it turned to this 90s kind of grunge movement because I grew out of the emo phase mostly, but I feel like grunge persisted in a really good way. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to write an essay on it, but it's like something about, for me, 90s grunge is more pervasive and like relevant than I don't know. Maybe it's just deeper it's just deeper stuff usually. But Alice in Chains was a huge and is a huge. My song Puppet Show is It's me being like, what would Alice in Chains kind of write today? It's nowhere close to that. But I sat down thinking like, man, like I just love Nutshell so much. How do I kind of write that? But the singular band that has throughout my whole life been kind of like a compass both on this is how you play music is Switchfoot. And that's such a homeschool church answer. But the reasoning is both like
they're great, man. They're great.
But as I grew up, I appreciate them more. Like their example, and they've stayed like clean and out of drama for 30 years. Same guys, although Drew left a couple of years ago. But what I love about them is like John Foreman is his own entity. He has a whole bunch of solo stuff, and he's like an entity, one of those guys. But nobody knows like anything about his family because he's not out here posting personal life. Nobody can tell you anything except they serve. So I think that's such an awesome thing there. But they're very good at double meanings of songs. Like Beautiful Letdown is 20 years old. And so Dare You to Move and Meant to Live have been in the conversation recently quite a bit. And both of those are like, well, are they about God or about myself or about a girl or about like, and it's just that beauty of like that song can mean so many different things to you in each season of life. Like, and I love that. And it's just like, that kind of headspace is it's really weird to get into. Like, how do you make a perennial song that can be not all things to all people, but how can this be relevant regardless of what you believe at your core? So anyway, I think that's
a great one, man. And great like main band there to be inspired by Switchfoot. I actually saw them at Epcot at Disney World a few months back actually. And
it
was my
Thursday.
first time.
Yeah.
Are you seeing them? Oh, yeah, because I know they're going to be here in Orlando.
They're in Wilmington Thursday. So
right.
They're in Orlando now, or Fort Lauderdale or something. Yeah.
I know that they're about to be here, and so or they already did. I don't know what it was. I saw them post about it, and I was gonna go. Unfortunately, I went to a bunch of concerts in the last few weeks, and it was kind of like a pick and choose kind of thing. Unfortunately, but since I saw them a few months ago, though, I was so blown away. It was my first time seeing them live, and even though I've been a fan since I was a kid. And I've been a fan since I was a kid, you know, kind of like, again, similar, like, you know, having grown up in the church, they were one of those bands that like I listened to a lot. And while I don't listen to a whole lot of Christian music these days, what I loved about their music as I've gotten older is kind of like you said, like the songs have these dual meanings and they have like a sense of maturity to them, and you can relate them to a lot of things. And I think that's just what I really love about their music. They have so many great songs. I've been listening to their like hour version of The Beautiful Letdown that they recently released, which they have a bunch of artists come on and also sing versions of those songs as well, which was cool. And they're just one of those really consistent, like great sounding bands. And then they just genuinely do sound incredible live. Like the lead singer, he just sounds phenomenal. He sounds just like the record, if not better, live. And
they're a rock band, dude. Like they can get it.
He kills it, man. He was like walking around when I saw him at Epcot. He was walking all through the aisles and like giving everybody high fives and singing perfectly the whole time. Didn't lose pitch once. Stepping over like different like bleachers and stuff like that to go and like high five people. And then even halfway through their set, somebody had a sign up for a certain song. And he was like, it's not part of the set, but it's going to be part of the set now. And they just instantly on the fly sang the song. And it was pretty epic to see, man. So that's a really great example. You know, I guess I struggle with that whenever it comes down to like, well, who does this band sound like? Because unless it's like super obvious to me, a lot of times I struggle because there's so many different sounds now. And so I would struggle, I think, naturally if somebody was like, well, who does Camelcase sound like to you? But Switchfoot is a really good one that I can kind of say that I totally, like you saying that, I totally see
the essence,
inspiration, right? For sure. The essence that you are a fan of Switchfoot is so clear and cut in there when it comes to that. So I think that's really cool, man. That kind of added a different perspective to your songs. Do you have a favorite Switchfoot album or song that like is an instant go-to for you?
Yeah, so favorite album is Nothing Is Sound, which is the one right after Beautiful Letdown. And I'm hoping they do a 20th year tour of that one too, because that's one
I love that. I love that album.
On. Like, oh my gosh. Oh Gravity, which is the one after Nothing Is Sound, is probably tied. That's their most like, it's not punk, but that's the most like 4-instrument rock one they did. You know, it's just like, it's good stuff. Go-to songs, not really. I'm more with them, I'm just throw on an album, pick an album and go kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, they're great, man. And then I'm also like really digging as I get older. I'm digging a lot more U2, like a lot more, and it's beyond. I mean, Joshua Tree isn't even like top 5 favorite albums. Like I go all the way back to their first one, Boy, and like I Will Follow is the first song on that album, and it's just I don't know. I think a lot of people know it, but that's not the U2 song anyone thinks of when they think of U2.
Right,
And
right.
you just listen to it and you're like, it's like early, well, I guess it was 79, but it's like this really fun, just weird kind of garage rock song. And I'm like, this is great. Like that's a great song. Just that would be a sound I'd want to emulate for sure. That's a cool song.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I like a lot of that early U2 stuff in general. Like it's
yeah.
consistent with what they would write later on, but it's was different enough. They had like this kind of thing you hear in a lot of bands where like when they're first starting, there's kind of like this different kind of creativity coming out of them as they're trying to
Mm,
form these songs versus when they become tenured kind of creators, which a lot of times some artists create their best stuff later on, but kind of like U2 with like even like with Switchfoot, like that second album is or the one after the Beautiful Letdown. I love it, man. It's a great album. I
so
always
good.
always there's so many great songs on there, but I always think of songs like Lonely Nation or Politicians that are like such
Mhm,
underrated songs of theirs, in my opinion, where they just like
mhm.
something about the melodies and the guitar lines of those songs just stand out to me so much. And so speaking of the bands that you love that inspire you that you can kind of see in your music, who are maybe some artists that you like that people wouldn't expect that you're a ginormous fan of based on your music? Maybe somebody that like you're super inspired by, but you don't necessarily try to emulate their sound.
Sia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
love Sia. I love No Doubt. So Gwen Stefani.
Nice.
And then Depeche Mode. Like, I play personal Jesus for my wife probably once a week, and she hates it. And then she like listened to the words, and she's like, "This isn't about Jesus at all." It was like such a funny revelation for her. But I really like I love Sia. I think Sia's got kind of that, and Miley Cyrus does as well. Just that girl rocker voice
Right, right.
that I love a lot. As far as I think that's kind of like on it. Um, I can't think Kawanika Michael. Uh, I love his stuff, and I think he went from reggae to what he does now, which is amazing. But I mean, it's I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm open to all genres like most people say. Like I like whole music. Like I don't like country. I don't like. I love 80s, 90s, early aughts rap. Um, and but I don't know. Rock. I'm pretty open to. Like I listen to Television is one of the bands I love a lot. That I have a lot of bands I'm realizing that just get on Alex's nerves when I play them in our house. And she's like, "Can you just this song again?" I'm like, "It's Electric Light Orchestra, and they have more than more than the one song everyone knows." So, um, but yeah, I think rock. I go back decades, but I think for weird stuff, it's kind of that '90s 2000s turn. Um, but yeah, Sia would be my answer if I had to pick one.
Nice, man. Yeah, those are good options. You know, it's always nice
Yeah,
for me to hear like artists that just like you don't expect that they're inspiring. You know, my favorite band personally is Avenged Sevenfold. I actually just saw them a few weeks ago,
sick, sick.
and what they did with their latest album is so weird and different, and a lot of people haven't liked it. If you're into like their early hardcore stuff or just straightforward metal stuff, it's a very weird progressive rock album that starts like almost like System of a Down esque with their first song,
Mm.
and then the last song on the album is like Frank Sinatra. Like the style of the album changes as you go further through it, and there's these different
Oh,
sounds throughout. And there's songs that are like heavy and like rock oriented,
yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
there's stuff that's kind of like almost like this kind of like there's a song in there that's like heavily inspired by Daft Punk, and it sounds just like a Daft Punk song. But then like the last song on the
Huh.
album, they have all these weird progressive. I feel like as a musician, you would really appreciate like kind of how that album changes.
Yeah.
But a lot of people haven't enjoyed it because it's so distinct from what they do. But I genuinely I love it, and I think what's interesting is my favorite singer is M Shadows from Avenged Sevenfold, and
Mhm.
he talks about in a lot of interviews like he's a metal guy, and when I was younger and I would see their early interviews, they would always talk about Pantera and Metallica and all these guys that were inspiring them then. But as they've gotten older, they talk about like, I don't know, Kanye West or Daft Punk or like these
Yeah.
different like weird artists that just don't fit within their bracket, you know, and they'll talk about all these different artists and they'll post about them. And I'm like, wow, I just never in my mind thought that this band was inspired by all these different things, but it plays into
Mm.
what they do in the future, or sometimes it isn't even something that you see in their music, but they're inspired by it, you know. And I think that's just
Yeah.
such an
Yeah.
interesting thing about musicians is that more often than not, they are fans of and are inspired by things that you like never even see within their music. So I think those are the great options right there that you gave because yeah, you know, I can totally see how you can pull inspiration from those, even if it's not like the music you're gonna write, you know?
Yeah. There's a tangent point and actually a question for you out of that. It's almost like an inside joke at this point that Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher album that came out in 2020 was like, and it is amazing. But like every rock indie person is like, yeah, she's my inspiration. It's almost an inside joke at this point, and she deserves it all. It's awesome. Um, but that album did kind of, it seems, reinvigorate this new generation, you know, like this new music. I'm wondering if there's been like a film or something recently where you're like, oh, they can still make movies, they can still make good music, and like
Right,
how
right.
Phoebe did. Is there something you've seen recently that's just kind of like, dang, I
It's
like,
it it's tough, man. I watch so much that sometimes it
I
all
know,
like,
man.
you know, I would have to like look at what I've seen recently and think about it. But yeah, you know, every here and there, you know, you see I think what I love to see is when an actor who is well known for something that maybe people don't like is able to blow people out of the water. You know what I mean? Or
Mm,
show people that like they can do something different, you know. And I think one thing I dislike sometimes is this mentality of I didn't like that thing they did, so I don't like them. And I'm sure, you know, you see people talk about that a lot of times. It happens with music all the time where an
yeah,
artist changes their sound. I don't like them anymore. It's like, okay, well, you like their last 7 albums, you just didn't like this one, you
right.
know?
Daniel
And
Radcliffe syndrome.
right, right. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
there's definitely that element of it. And so when it comes to like movies, it's tough to say, but like, you know, I always like to think about like last year, like there was so much hate that people had for Robert Pattinson being Batman, and then he killed it, you know?
that's what I
And
heard.
and have you not seen it?
I haven't. Should
Yeah,
I?
so he did an yeah, he did an incredible job, man. I think it's one of the best Batman movies that's ever been made. It's
Oh
dark,
wow.
it's gritty, and
Yeah.
he does a great job of playing a different version of Batman. You know, I think for the most part it was well received by people, and I think more than anything, and he's done other movies that, you know, showed that he can act beyond Twilight, but so many people were just like
Yeah.
Twilight, Twilight, Twilight. But it's like that's was so long ago in his creative journey that he's really changed, you know. And like I think of a movie like Good Times that he did just a couple of years prior to Batman, and that was one that I remember. That was the first one for me that I saw him in, and I was like, wow, this dude can act, you know. And he
Yeah.
I didn't
Sure.
see the sparkly vampire guy. I saw like wow, this is a really good role for him, you know. And so I think there's that element of it, right? Like sometimes people will kind of act like same things happen sometimes with a director where somebody will be like, oh, they, you know, I didn't like that movie. They've lost their way. But then, you know, maybe you look back on things at a certain point, people's perspectives change, or there's that element of just realizing like, oh, okay, like here's something else that they did that I really liked, you know? And so
Yeah.
it's tough to say something specific unless I like looked at what I've seen recently.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fair.
but yeah, no, it's that's something that I always love to see is when I can see any director or any actor or something do something that like makes people like look at them in a different light, you know.
Mm.
I see here too. The movie man asked another question saying, "Is there a certain way to find yourself connecting to music in your mind, like an internal voice or in the inner sensation, ear that helps guide the creation or performance of music?"
Jeez, movie man. These are so deep. Is there a certain
I
way you
know.
find yourself connecting to music in your mind? Internal voice or inner sensation. So I am like all the introverts who say, or whatever they are that say, I'm an introvert, but I like to go out sometimes. And like I like partying, but then I like going home. So I'm like, well, you can't have it both ways, but I guess you can. I feel like I'm that way with music. There's some days it's like podcast only. And I'm the guy that when I'm driving, I don't really need to or like to listen to music. Um, it's a very strange relationship I have with it. I used to be the guy that only listened to like top 40 kind of stuff from each decade. So, but then I as I started deep diving on like 90s stuff and really just finding like, oh crap, like this stuff is good. And really, I think all it was is I was listening in the wrong places. And once I found a genre that connected with me, I started listening more intensely. And so now I'm rereading the, I want to make sure I don't get off too much, but when I would say it gets easier to create music the more music you know. It's a bigger bag of tricks to pull from. The answer of like, I mean, the bigger bag of tricks is probably the most beneficial. You can also have a framework for what you're aiming for, which is really helpful going into a song, and it just kind of becomes crucial. Like people like to think that it's just art, and your brain and heart just bleed onto a page and you have a song. But at some point, at like all of my songs, I sit down with my producer in pre-production and we cut. And I mean, I've had songs go from 5.5 minutes to 3.5 because that's like, yeah, you may be saying great stuff and whatever, but you can't get away with that as a single. And like, you got to keep people's attention. So it's, I don't know. Connecting with music in my mind is tricky, depending on how you take it, because of it's a love-hate relationship because of how my personal success is tied to it as well. So that's a big question. That's like, buy me a beer and let's sit down and talk about it.
Right. No, it's definitely a deep question. And D, I really appreciate you asking these questions, man.
Yeah,
Because
man.
yeah, you know, it's definitely I think it's different also with every project. At least I found where like there was times where maybe a melody just popped in my head and it was kind of like a, hey, I think that kind of sounds catchy. Let me start to throw
Yeah.
some words to it. Maybe I was with somebody like, you know, my old bandmates, and they'd start playing like a guitar line or some drums. Then we start grooving off of that, just that one melody. And then maybe they'd take that and switch into something else. And there'd be that moment where everybody looks at each other like, oh, I like what he's playing. Play along to that. And we
Yeah.
kind of find the song that way. And it became this thing where then I was kind of just listening to what the musicians were playing. And it was allowing me to kind of like take the feeling of what that initial melody was and start to write some lyrics, maybe a melody for like the different pieces, and then slowly kind of form something. Then there was other times that, you know, it was something that it was kind of a different way where like the musician had something, just a cool grooving sound, and we were able to kind of build off of that. But as far as like connecting to the music for me in my mind, a lot of times, you know, when I wanted to write stuff, and again, it's kind of sucks because the stuff that we recorded was just so amateur compared to what we were capable of later on, that just
Yeah.
never got recorded, you know?
Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things where like you kind of just want to just kind of like feel what you feel when you listen to the songs that you like, you know, like whether it be that groove and feeling, or that ability to attach to lyrics. And I think that that's something I can definitely get from your music, is that like your music has like this swaying kind of like, I don't know, you can really vibe with your music musically just on that level. And then you add on the layer that your songs actually have lyrical depth and a kind of a lived in perspective. And I think that now as an adult, more so than anything, I appreciate when I can listen to an artist and listen to their lived in experience and kind of what they're trying to portray in the song, while also being able to kind of input my own story with those lyrics. You know, I
That's
think
the
that's
point.
amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that more than anything, that's always what I wanted to try to get across as we started to write music in our later part, you know, and even when I wrote songs that never went anywhere, you know, it was more about like creating something that was able to make me, you know, groove and vibe with whatever the sway and the motion and the rhythm of the song was, and be able to enjoy that part of it on its own, but also be able to like sit back and listen to those lyrics. You know, I think one of my favorite things too that happens is, and I'm sure you have times like this where you hear some songs or you hear a song maybe a couple of times and you're like, man, I really like this. This is a nice song. Like maybe the chorus sticks with you and like the music, but then you have that moment where you're hearing it and you're like alone and you're like, damn, this song is deeper than I remember. Like now that I'm really, really listening to it. And I like that ability to rediscover the same song over and over again. And I think that a lot of times what I would want to do is write stuff that has that kind of a feeling, you know? So I don't know if that answers the question all that well, but
I like the way we took it.
yeah. It's a weird and interesting thing. And so I guess now too, a question I have for you as far as Camelcase's future. We talked about a little bit, obviously, how you would like to maybe get some other members in there at some point, and just gonna kind of see where it goes. But are there things that you haven't done with Camelcase yet, as in terms of the sound of the music or the
Mm.
scale of the music? That something that you'd actually would like to do, whether it be longer songs or a different sound altogether.
Um, Different sound would be tricky. So, uh, again, like it or not, music's a business. So you need to cater to in the beginning stages, as I still am. You got to cast a wide net. So you need to write, more I don't care anymores than puppet shows. Like you need to write bangers over reflective Bonnie Bears. Um, so uh, Ideally, if success and like how I would want to see Camelcase move is being able to have a fully fleshed um, album, top to bottom, where it's kind of like four of each mood. And I feel like that's not really a style, or bands don't write that way anymore because we've just become in such a single dominated culture. But where an album moves you, where you can have bangers, you can have upbeats, but then you have stuff that makes you want to cry. I'm thinking like Jesus Christ, like the brand new song that you're just like, where did this come from? And it's just like this deep introspective, everyone's crying, but also being adults about it. Like, and then you just turn around and have their some of their other stuff. Um, but I would love, maybe more than a sound, be able to bring it down and have that be heard in such a way, um, to the same level bangers happen. But you can't really go slow and somber until you have that audience that is like, yeah, we're bought into you, into what you do. Um, so I'm hoping that day comes, because I there is a kind of a Fleet Foxes side to me that I would like to explore more. Um, I think vocally, for a cheap, easy answer, I would like to get a little weirder on some of the effects on my voice and play around with um, crazy reverb or phaser. Like I wouldn't mind trying stuff like that and maybe get a little more Radiohead esque with some of the stuff I do. But overall, I like it. It's kind of a concept of, am I happy singing this with an acoustic guitar in my room? Like, does this make me happy? If so, it's going in. Like, it's that kind of thing right now. So, yeah, I think that's the nutshell answer.
Nice, man. And when it comes to performing a lot of these songs live, how do you find, like, what are the challenges of taking a song that sounds like a full band in in the recording versus like
Yeah.
playing these things live on your own?
Yeah. So, I mean, full band wise, that hasn't happened. Well, it's happened a bit last year, but not really in an official gig capacity. I have taken some of them, like Ebb and Flow. Actually, I sat down, changed the key, and wrote kind of an acoustic version of that song, which that's one of those on the back burner for when people care enough. Like, it's slower, and um, so the ones I do play live, such as cover shows or whatever, like they're kind of reworked to make sense in that context. So, but I mean, full band and playing them as you hear them hasn't really happened for me yet. But I am optimistic about that before the end of the year, though. So stay tuned
Awesome.
for that. Yeah, if you want that
Yeah, no, for
reveal.
sure. And do you have any shows coming up at all that you can plug right now, or is it something that's more in the works for the future?
Yeah, it's in the works, but it's like actually in the works, and that's not something I'm just saying. I met great guys this past week and jammed with them, and I think that'll turn into something. Um, but yeah, I mean, we've been in Wilmington since February, so just getting plugged in with the scene and stuff has kind of taken that long for us, and now it's time to kind of flex the contacts we know everywhere and kind of make something happen. So we are in the planning and prepping stage for sure.
Gotcha, man. Cool. Well, we talked a little bit also too about some of these, like, just the struggles of doing music. I have to ask, what is the most embarrassing, just like flat out, like, guts you every time to think about it, like,
Oh
on
no.
stage experience that you can think about with music? For
Um,
me, just for the sake of at least me asking you this question, or
yeah.
at least throwing my own out there. Um,
Okay.
Back when I was playing with my band, I'll never forget. We were playing at a venue that's down in South Florida. I'm sure you may be familiar with it, called Revolution Live, and it's like kind of like a
Yeah.
house of blues. It's like got a
Yeah,
decent
man.
stage, and it was part of like this big like battle of the bands, and it was a cool experience. We played there another time for a Battle of the Bands, and we won like second place or something, which was really cool. But yeah, we played this other one, and I'll never forget that the guitar cable of my guitarist got wrapped around my leg, and I ripped the cord out from his guitar, but also like there was enough of a pull that it made me fall over too.
Oh,
I just
nice,
fell
man.
in front of like a couple of hundred people, and yeah, I kind of had to just play it off. So what about you, man? Do you have any of those experiences that you're
Man.
like, I can't believe that happened in front of an audience?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a bunch of like, playing with the click and you get off, and I've got a bunch of that missing coming in. I think the biggest, if I had to pick, was I was asked to play lead guitar for a Luke Bryan cover show in Atlanta, and so I did. But the flip of that was the second show we did was a JT cover show. So you're going from Luke Bryan to Justin Timberlake, and you're like, okay. So I don't know what you know about JT, but there ain't a lot of guitar going on. So I don't know what song it was. So we're playing JT stuff, which basically meant I just got to jam. But it was also a gig where we were coming from all over the Southeast to play this thing. So we just listened to tracks and practiced and showed up and played. We didn't rehearse. And I never met the lead singer. It was through our drummer friend CJ that I was even there. And I never met the other two guys. And so the singer's in the middle of a song. He comes over to me and he does the universal sign for solo. We're playing in Atlanta at some sort of country festival. There's an easy, maybe 1,000 people scattered throughout the thing, but easy couple hundred directly in front of us. And so I start riffing on a basic like minor pentatonic scale and all that. And I realize my in-ears aren't really working. Like they're not, I just hear myself go boom, like a lot louder. And I'm like, oh crap, my $50 Sures have let me down. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm like trying to fake it. And then I get told later I was half a step down in key than what the song was in. And I kind of made a fool out of myself. So luckily Camelcase was not really a branded thing then, and nobody knew my name, and my name was not over that. But that has certainly given me pause about my guitar chops for sure. So
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. It's a lot of people, and that's the worst
yeah.
part is whether it's like it could be 10 people and be embarrassing, but you add in like in the case of mine, there was like probably about like 200 people there, and in the case of yours, a few hundred
Yeah.
to about 1,000. Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah. And it
definitely
was
a crunchy
retroactive.
feeling.
I didn't know it was happening at the time. So it was kind of like, oh my gosh,
That's
secondhand
the worst.
embarrassment for myself.
Right, because at least if it was like something that you could hear was going wrong, you could try to like fix it in the moment. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've had the in-ear trouble. I've had the coming off time trouble.
Oh, that's the
With,
worst.
and then it sucks because especially when I was playing drums, you start speeding up or you start going slower. You have the click track, but then you're trying to catch it, and you're like almost
Yeah.
hitting. You're not on any of the time now because you're trying to catch up, and then you are completely off. And
It's better to stop. It really is. It's better to stop and let it pass you and catch up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because you try to catch up in that moment. A lot of times, if you can't do it immediately, you're just gonna make it the whole thing sound worse. And yeah, I've definitely had those times where the in-ears weren't working. Maybe I was completely flat on a note that I was singing or something, and somebody would tell me later
about
on.
that genre. Yeah. Well, that's true too. Like singing, there's a lot of like reach for that note, and you just don't even come close, and you're like, well, that was the climax of the song. Like,
Yeah.
so sorry.
I'll never forget that happened one time. I can't remember what the name of the song is. I want to say it's a Christian song that we sang in my church that I would lead. It was called like Hope of the World. I can't remember who sang it. I want to say it was Chris Tomlin. I could be wrong though. And there's a part where like it slows down and he kind of is like singing this one phrase over and over again, and then everything builds up, and then all the music drops, and then it's just like it would just be me singing it. It's kind of like it's not like super high, but it was like it had your chest voice is in there,
Yeah.
And I sang it, and I'll never forget that. Like there was one time in particular that my throat just was like at the end of that note, and it was just like I just remember like the song came back in. I had to keep singing. I could see some faces in the church were noticeably, you know, kind of like yikes. I
Oh
looked
my
over
gosh.
and some of my peers on stage that were singing along with me were kind of like, all right,
Yeah, all
and
right.
then it became a joke for like at least the next few weeks every time I sang that song. So
Joyful noise, baby.
yeah, man, definitely a lot of those cringe moments. Do you have any times that you can really think of being on stage that were like the complete opposite, where you were like nervous and it turned out to be like just like this was like everybody's into it. You're kind of growing in confidence. Do you have any of those that you can speak to that you remember?
Yeah, I remember even back in my college band Everhart days, we played, is it Plant 64? What's that? There's a venue downtown next to Social and Beecham, downtown Orlando. Um, and so we're playing there, and the guy there is awesome. Marshall Rones. He's like every band in Orlando starts and goes through him. Super cool guy. Just the most. He loves music. He's exactly who you want in your life. He gave us a gig there, and it was kind of, you had your four friends that might show up, and then people trickle out and whatever. And I mean, we played fine, but his love and reaction and just like, dude, like that was awesome. I loved hearing that. And like you knew he was genuine, and he just gave such praise, and he was into it. That helped spur me on and kept me going. But when I was doing cover shows, I would see it a lot because I was able to kind of pull the party trick out often and jump up and, kind of more entertain and jump octaves. But I always like I have kind of my own version, like everyone does, of Hallelujah. And I pretty much just wrote a bridge to it, and I sing the bridge, and it goes high, but it's a fun song, but it's always a song people like listening to. It's just one of those songs. And it's also happens to be one of the very few songs I'm like, I can crush this song every time. Like, it's just one of those 3 or 4 where you're like, I got it. Like, I need to sing that song. Like, it's just, so that one was always a fun song to sing because you kind of get them because of Hallelujah's, prestige, but then you can keep them because of your spin on it. And that's kind of the first time like playing that. I was like, oh wow, like I have something to offer existing things. I have something unique I'm bringing. So that was kind of cool.
No, that's awesome. And yeah, that,
Yeah,
that I think sometimes like kind of like you said, like the party trick thing of being able to play some covers. Yeah, it can bring a room together, and especially in like more intimate, it's like kind of setting. I
exactly.
found that like
Exactly.
back in the day when I was with my band, if there was just a couple of us around, I'll never forget one time we played an acoustic show and our bassist and our second guitarist couldn't be at the show. And it was like the whole gig was supposed to, I think they called it like the stripped down show or something. It was supposed to be just like kind of
Oh, yeah. When
like
they don't,
everything was supposed to be
when they're
acoustic.
not there, that would be it.
Right. It was the perfect situation. And we were just gonna all play, but like in more of an acoustic set, 2 acoustic guitars, maybe
Oh,
have like
okay.
more of an acoustic bass kind of thing, and like just go more acoustic all around. But then when we got to the venue, it was a popular venue down in South Florida for a while, and then they ended up closing, called the Talent Farm. And what's it called? They had a stage, and we played there tons of times, and we would play on the stage. But there were times where there was this instance where they would use just the floor. And so in this situation, we got there. There was a couple of groups that played before us. We kind of jumped on last minute, and it was amazing because nobody really knew who we were except for the promoter and a couple of the other, like maybe a couple of people that were there for other bands. And we're like, hey, they were like, oh, you guys are playing tonight? We're like, yeah, for sure. And I'm like, oh, cool, man, it's good to see you. Like, blah blah. So a couple of them knew some of the songs, and some of them, most people didn't. And like people started sitting kind of like kumbaya style on the floor for this venue,
Oh, wow.
and playing like while we played. And it was great because we played on the floor instead of the stage. We had the drum set down there. We played like a lot lighter. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, we just kind of just played to this audience of like maybe like 30 to 40 people. It was a really intimate small room experience.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and we played a bunch of our own songs that people were into, but then we played, we pulled the party trick kind of thing and played some popular covers, including like Everlong by Foo
Yeah.
Fighters. And yeah, just I'll never forget that the promoter and like the owner of the venue afterwards, he was like, came over, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he's like that cover would have made Dave Grohl proud. I was like, damn, dude, that's awesome,
You
man. So
did good, Sean.
right, exactly. And so moments like that, yeah, I think that was just so fulfilling and so enriching. And it's moments like that that make me miss doing music as much as I do YouTube now. You know, like YouTube for me is my creative outlet at the moment, but I do miss playing music live because you do get to connect with people in this way where it's like it's intimate, man. You know, and I find more often than not something that I always have to remind myself when I was stressing out about, you know, kind of like being in my head is like, while there are a lot of a-holes in this world who want to like bring you
Yeah.
down, there's that element too of like most people don't like when you go somewhere. If I go to a restaurant and I see somebody setting up to play music, I never want them to suck, you know, like I'm
Yeah.
hoping that they're good. And so I always have to keep in mind for myself when I was playing music that it's kind of in a similar boat, you know, like people saw us setting up, you know, they didn't want you to suck. If you sucked, then you sucked and they were probably going to talk about you
Right.
sucking.
Right.
But you know, most people don't want you to suck. So just kind of try to put your best foot forward. But you know, sometimes you do suck though.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like we need more forces in music, and I mean like we need more. I feel like a lot of local musicians and personality or inexperience, they're very neutral, and they're waiting for some sort of. And I guess this is a bigger thing than music, but they're waiting for feedback before they decide how to react.
Right.
And we need many more people who are just like, I'm Jordan, I'm Camelcase, I play this. This is what How are you? Like, just I feel like we just really need people who are very like, I also happen to play music, but just you want to be around them and you want,
Right.
and I think that's something that's one of the few advantages, we might have as older and not like in college and unsure about so much, where now it's like, I have a perspective on where music can be and what I hope to accomplish with it. And what I hope to accomplish with it also has equal importance when there's no instrument or microphone in my hand. Like there's still work to do to give people hope on the floor. So I think I don't know. I think there's a reckoning coming in music world. I really do. I think there's going to be a return um, to some level of like, I'm tired of going to a show and listening to the Spotify track. Essentially, like I just miss music, and I think it's going to pop up. So I'm
Yeah.
hopeful.
Well, I think that's why I love the rock and roll genre, man. Is that like while there's a
Yeah.
little bit of that, I think less often, you know, do you find that the band's not playing, you know. And lately, I've gone to a bunch of shows lately, and it's amazing because it's just you do have that, you know. That's why I was so inspired when I saw Switchfoot, as we were talking about earlier. When I
Yeah.
saw them live, it was like they're putting on a show. They're performing. The energy's there. Like this is real. I can feel it, you know. And
Yeah.
it's like it does suck when you go to see an artist and they're playing tracks. You know, it's one thing to have like a backing track that is meant to be like electronic or something like that, but like when it's complete, when it can be played by musicians and
Yeah.
live, it should be, and there's a connection there. And so, yeah, I think when you go down to the root of it, it's like that original kind of just being able to connect with the person playing.
Yeah.
You know, like you mentioned, kind of like, oh, I'm Jordan, I'm Camelcase, you know, blah blah blah. And I you know, kind of like that acoustic show I was just mentioning, that was it for us. You know, we just sat down and it just seemed so calm. And I remember that we felt super calm in the moment, and we allowed that to kind of just flow into how we tackled the night, where it was kind of like, you know, hey, I'm Anthony, this is Robbie, this is Mike, and we're just gonna play a couple of our songs. We have a band called Send Us to Life, blah blah blah, and then we just went into it, man. And they were into it just because there was like kind of like just a very personal connection to it. And I think it's kind of like that's like a beautiful thing about starting music, especially if you can connect with people in this small room, you know. And I
Yeah.
mean that's sometimes something that the music world can give you that the YouTube world can be a little bit daunting on, or like it
Yeah.
beats me. I beat myself up on. Like I oftentimes when I'll see that a video after a day will only have gotten like 50 something views, I'll start to beat myself up. But I always have to tell myself, like, what if those 50 something people were here in front of me, you know, like that,
Right.
you know,
Right.
watching me, you know. And it's kind of like it would feel a lot more overwhelming than it does when you just kind of like look at it like a number, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but hey, man, listen, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know we talked a little bit about how long we were going to go beforehand, but dude, this has been a pleasure to do, man. I've had a lot of fun talking to you about music, and I just want to kind of give the floor to you really quickly to promote and plug anything that you want to. Like I said to everybody, that down below in the description box, you guys can find the straight link to his Instagram and his Spotify for Camelcase, where you can go and support his music. My favorite song is I Don't Care Anymore, but he has a brand new song called Turn Back Time, which is also a really great track. And yeah, man, anything you just want to promote, plug, or just say in terms of your music and what people can expect from you?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have access now to my links and stuff, so feel free to give a follow if you want, and like send me a DM. I really do genuinely like chatting with people on Instagram. I get asked a lot, what's the best way to help? I would just offer a challenge. Like if you have people in your life who are musicians, just once a week, just share somebody's reel to your story, and that's it. And call it a day. Call it your good deed of the day. If you're super active, make it once a day, make it once every 2 days. You guys have no idea. Like, well, you might actually, but I mean, it just helps so much. And that kind of love, support, feedback is genuinely appreciated. So if the artists in your life that you know, just drop them a line. Just, like it really, really does keep some of us going for the next song. So much appreciated, and thanks for hosting this, man. Like super glad to be on it. It was really fun.
Man. Yeah, this was a blast, dude. I really appreciated talking to you about music and just your passion behind it. I think is evident, and I wish you the best with Camelcase. Genuinely, I look forward to hearing the next song and seeing where it all goes, and just seeing.
Me too,
maybe at some point we'll do this again at some point in the future, and
yeah,
we'll promote something else, whatever the case may be. But
sure.
Real quick, my mom chimed in here saying, "Great conversation. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate it. Got to get the support from the family for sure. Appreciate it, Mom. Thank you so much." But yeah, thank you so much, man. Genuinely. And any final words on your part?
I'm just happy to be here, dude. Thanks for this, and we'll do it soon. I hope there's more more down the road for me. So we'll see.
For sure, man. I believe there will be for sure. So again, guys, the links to Jordan's socials, specifically his Instagram and his Spotify account and all that's right down below. Go give him some love. Check out the music. DM him. Let him know what you thought of the songs. And we'll catch all you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you tuned in live or you're tuning in after the fact. We really appreciate it. And we'll see all you guys later, guys.